Good day and welcome to Of Many Things, the Facebook live stream that is based on my column in America Magazine. I'm Father Matt Malone, and I'm the editor-in-chief of America and the president of America Media. And happy birthday, America Magazine. Today is the 111th anniversary of America. We published our first issue on this day in 1909. It's hard to believe. Sometimes it feels like I've actually been around for that entire time, but I'm just one part of the constellation that is the history of this magazine. This morning, as we did last year and the year before that, as is our custom, we read the first editorial that America published in 1909. We do that together as a staff as a way of reminding us that our history is an indispensable guide to our future and helps to orient us in our present. So more about that in a second. But as we celebrate this anniversary today, it's also our anniversary giving day, and this is when we invite our audience, our friends, our subscribers to help support our work at America. And I'm delighted to say that already, since midnight last night, we have raised more than $25,000 from more than 300 donors in 32 states. My thanks to all those who have already given. And if you can, I respectfully ask you to consider making a gift to America. This work is vitally important. I know that there's a lot of pressures on everybody right now, but to the extent that you're able to help support this ministry, I would be most grateful. And I'm especially grateful to the chair of our board, Susan Braddock, and to the chair of our development committee, Tom Roberts, and to our team in the development office who've been working for about 16 or 21 days now, making sure that this day went off without a hitch. If you would like to support America, you can reach us at americamedia.org/donate. That's americamedia.org/donate. This is a really important day, and it is for a number of reasons. You might recall that Seamus Heaney, the Irish poet, he wrote a very famous work that concluded with this phrase, "Hope and history rhyme." And that really speaks to me fundamentally, particularly on days where we celebrate our history, like this one, our 111th anniversary, because to me, hope and history really do rhyme. I mean, our history, whether it's the history of America or it's the history of the United States, or it's the history of the church, or it's our own personal histories. To me, history is an important building block of hope. And what do I mean by that? I mean a couple of things. One, as I said earlier, our own history, having a knowledge, having a deep awareness of what has come before us and who has come before us, it gives us a guide to our future. By studying history and by recalling that history, we recall the lights and shadows of human experience, whether it's our own at an individual level, or it is the experience of a community, or the experience of the Pilgrim Church. That experience ought to inform how we envision the future and what kind of future that we envision. And in fact, without it, then we would be without a map, really, and headed out into uncharted waters, which, of course, the future always is. So a sense of history gives us a guide to the future. It gives us a map, as it were, of what came before us. And like with all maps, it can change from time to time. And our understanding of terrain, the same terrain, can change. And that river that was there 4 or 5 years ago now might be an eighth of a mile over in that direction. But the point is, it's a starting place. And it gives us an orientation. I think the second reason why history is really important is because it was really the spiritual dimension of it. So from my point of view, there's a kind of reassurance that comes from the study of history. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take the current moment in which we're living. It is a global pandemic. We are facing an economic catastrophe in the Western world. Everybody is feeling the pressures of these twin, almost cataclysmic events, right? Um, and we, of course, are feeling that at America, both individually as individuals, concerned for our family, our friends, ourselves, but also corporately, as it were, as a community, as a ministry of the church. We feel those pressures too. And we feel all of the anxieties, all of the fear that accompanies that. But what I realized today when we were reading that first editorial from 1909 is that America, as an organization, as a magazine, as a media ministry, we've been here before. If we were born in 1909 and we're still alive today, that means that we've already lived through one Great Depression, not to mention the Great Recession of 2008. We have already lived through the First World War and the Second World War and the Korean War and the Vietnam War. We have already lived through Watergate. We have already lived through the climax and the end of the Cold War, through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Right? So by remembering that history, it gives, I think it can give us a sense of reassurance that we as a community, anyway, at that level, we have been through this before, and that we undoubtedly have the same spiritual and intellectual resources that our forebears did to confront the moment in which we're living. I remember also feeling that reassurance, which is that comes from history, which is the seed of hope, I think, or a seed of hope. I remember experiencing that during the height of the sexual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church. You know, America magazine is 111 years old. The United States of America is a little more than 2 centuries old. The church in its earthly pilgrimage is 2,000 years old. There is nothing, virtually nothing, that the church could face today that it has not faced previously, that it has not gone through previously. Just as America magazine, endured all of those peaks and the valleys of the last 100 years, the church has endured. Along with the synagogue, the church is the only institution that survived the fall of the Roman Empire. It survived the Middle Ages. It survived the bubonic plague. It survived the discovery of a new world. It survived all of that involved, all of the lights and the shadows of that experience of discovery. It survived the 19th century. It survived all of those things I just listed before, a Great Depression, 2 world wars, and so forth. And yet the church still stands. That sense of history, as I said, it orients us. It gives us a map that we can take as we go out into the uncharted terrain of the future. But it also, I think, gives us a sense of reassurance, a sense of hope. That reassurance that I think is one of the fundamental seeds that fully blossoms in hope when it is watered by the grace of God. That has practical implications, not to overly spiritualize or homilize this reality, but that sense of history, it has real practical implications. So, for example, today, when we were reading the first editorial from America, the editorial board talks in that editorial about how, if they had all of the resources at their disposal that they would wish for, they would actually publish every single day, right? Because the pace of events is so great. So if we think that the experience of modern or contemporary life is frenetic, it's reassuring to know that they felt the same way, that they felt overpowered and challenged, challenged and perhaps overpowered by the march of events, by the sort of frantic pace of events, by the challenges and the opportunities of emerging technologies. Well, one of the things that's useful to know is that in knowing that history, as I said, it helps us to make sense of our present. So that vision of the first editorial board saying, I hope we would like to actually publish every day, that's now been fulfilled. We do now publish every day. Our print magazine comes at a regular interval, but the vast majority of our content and the vast number of people that we engage in with that content happens digitally, and it happens every single day. In fact, sometimes it happens by the hour, right? So it's not so much that there is, it's not so much that we have this thing that is America that exists between the four corners of this piece of paper. It's we have this gift that is America that is a charism, that is a mission in the world, and that mission plays out on whatever platform or method of communication is most expedient. In that first editorial, they talked about the telegraph and they talked about correspondence all over the globe. They were looking for the right platform, the right frequency and print, and were unafraid to take on these new technologies and use them to their advantage in this ministry. And I think that is in part because they had this kind of fearlessness, which of course came from their faith, right? Their faith that whatever happened, whatever choices they made, events for good or ill would have within them, the possibility of calling forth from us a deeper response to God and one another. There was fundamental faith there, right? Which in Jesuit language we call finding God in all things. But they also had a sense of history, and they knew that from the very dawn of time, from humankind's emergence into civilization, from the invention of the wheel, communities and people have been challenged by emerging technologies, and that there wasn't a reason to fear them if we approached them in that spirit of faith, that sense that this can, like all things created, it can be used for good or ill, but we have faith that God is guiding our choices, and even when we choose wrongly, God is still with us in those choices. As we do every week, I want to encourage you to send us your prayer requests. We're happy to pray for you at America. Our Jesuits and our lay colleagues are praying all the time. We now have a dedicated channel in our internal communication system just for prayer requests, and we do get a lot of them, and we're happy to have them. You can leave them right there on the Facebook page. Or if you have any other questions about the things I'm talking about today or what's going on at America, I'm happy to take them. One thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is an interesting bit of content that we put together for the 100th anniversary of America 11 years ago. And it's a profile, which is very, very, very well done. A historical profile of our first editor-in-chief, who was a man named John Wynne, W-Y-N-N-E. He was a Jesuit from New York. In fact, he was a graduate of Xavier High School. it's a really interesting piece, and I think it's coming up on the screen now. But I encourage you to check it out because, among other things, it's just a fun read. It's very well written. It's by a member of our current staff, Jim Keane, who is a senior editor in America, and by Father Jim McDermott, who is a contributing writer for America. There are a couple of things that are interesting about this John Wynne fellow. One is he was a fierce visionary. He had a genius, the kind of genius that I'm talking about right now. He was able to, in a spirit of faith, which was his bedrock, the bedrock of his worldview. In that spirit of faith, he was able to draw on the past to envision and to articulate a new future, and then to marry the two to create a new present reality. And so John Wynne had this incredible imagination, and he had a unique ability to inspire people. He was looking around at the history and the unfolding history of the church in this country, and he said, you know, now in 1909, we are on the verge, Catholics in the United States are on the verge of claiming our rightful place in the order of this republic, of taking on a new role in the life of the United States by virtue of the immigration that they had seen over the previous 40 years and would continue to see well into the 20th century. He said, so it's important then that Catholics have a voice in the public discourse, and that we are able to engage with issues in the public square and to articulate what we consider to be the central moral questions or moral issues or values that are at stake in that debate. And he decided that he would looking to England, he would take the very best that he found in the experience of the tablet magazine, which also helped to inspire America magazine, and he would make it real in a specifically American context. And that's why he actually called it America. People often ask me, why is it called America? It's really called that for two reasons. One is because it concerns the things of America, which didn't necessarily just mean the United States, but of the New World, the Western Hemisphere. It concerned the emergence of the shift in the center of gravity from Western Europe to the Americas. But secondly, he wanted to make very clear at a time that was riddled with religious prejudice and xenophobia, he wanted to make very clear that Catholics are Americans. And so he called it America. But here's the lesson about John Wynne. He lasted 1 year as editor-in-chief of America. Only 1 year. He had the vision and the zeal to start this project, but he didn't have the operational and managerial skill to see it through. He was a great, almost prophetic leader in his time, but he wasn't a great manager. And so what does that tell us then? What does that bit of history tell us about our present? I mean, for America media, for America magazine, what that tells us is that this work is not and cannot ever be the work of merely one person, because each of us has gifts to bring to the table, and none of us individually have all of the gifts that are required to make the mission of America real in our time. And so we rely on having a really talented staff, a really talented and committed group of contributors to our pages, We rely on the loyalty and the gifts of our readers and our audience. And all of that coming together is what makes America a vital ministry, a ministry that is fully alive, a ministry that it still, after 111 years, is pursuing its mission. In other words, we are a ministry. I think of the church as a bit like a pointillist painting. There are in pointillism, as you may know, there are dots of varying colors that are placed on the canvas, and then the person who is viewing the canvas actually mixes those colors in their eye, right, to form a picture, to form a whole, right? And similarly, in a ministry, each person brings a dot to the canvas, and together they form a whole. Together they give us a picture of of who we are and who we are meant to be. Again, I'm really happy to take your questions, and I'm really happy to be joined by some of the folks who are faithful friends and readers of America, including Jamie Burke-Clark, who has journeyed with us on many pilgrimages as part of our travel program, and Marianne Christopher, who's based here in New York. And one of the questions that's being thrown at me right now is, how many editors of America have there been? That's a very good question. There are 14. There have been 14 editors of America, including myself. John Wynne was the first. I can't actually name them all. I won't, because it might bore you, but I can actually do it because a few years ago I came up with a memory device to remember at least the ones leading up to Father Thurston Davis in the mid 20th century. Each, as I said, as I was alluding to earlier, each brought his own gifts to the work of America. Each had a different vision of what America, being true to the spirit, to the values articulated present in that first editorial, of what America should be in its own time, right? And so if you look back throughout our history, you will see in the change of editors, a change in editorial focus. Sometimes we focused more on issues in the world than we did within the church. Sometimes it was more within the church than issues in the world. Sometimes we were more focused on the literary experience of the country by exploring questions in arts and letters. Sometimes we were less interested in that. We were interested more in what is happening in popular culture. All of those choices, though, are A, rooted in the same values, and B, those are choices made by people within a specific context, right? Within a specific historical context. So while the essential value of America as a work is as important as it was 111 years ago and is still the same, right? How we live that out can change. The charism of a group remains constant, but what it does to live out that charism can change to accommodate different historical realities. So, for example, the charism of the Franciscans, in part, is to accompany the poor and to assist the poor, right? But how the Franciscans do that, that can change depending on the social, political, or ecclesial context. It might be opening a hospital in one era. It might be opening soup kitchens in another era. It might be founding a university in another era to provide the intellectual framework through which questions of public policy affecting the poor can be shaped and debated. And similarly, with America, that charism, that brand in commercial terms, remains constant, but how we achieve it can change. One other question, watching on YouTube, where do you see America in 5 to 10 years? Well, first of all, I see America doing what it does now, leading the conversation about faith and culture. There are a lot of media organizations in this country that are profoundly challenged right now. And there are media organizations within the church that are profoundly challenged, not just by these events that I spoke of at the top, but by seismic shifts in how media is consumed, produced and consumed in the contemporary world. And so I'm afraid that in the larger industry, the larger media community, over the next few years, we're going to see some folks closing down or consolidating or cutting back on what they're doing. I have faith that America is going to perdure through those changes and challenges. We also face challenges, and the future is, no one's future is guaranteed, but I have every confidence that we'll, at a minimum, be here 5 years from now. But as I said, how is the mission of America lived out in its specific ecclesial, political, social context? That can shift. So we're looking right now, and we're learning from this experience. We are looking at what is the best way to deliver content across all of our platforms. What is the best way to serve our readers at this time, at this emerging, at this moment in the life of the church and of the United States? We're learning, we're listening, and we have a lot of platforms at our disposal in order to achieve that work, including audio, video, print, social media, person-to-person events, and so forth. How that mix actually plays out over the next 5 to 10 years, it's not clear right now because we're still learning. But I have every confidence that America will still be here in 5 or 10 years, leading the conversation and doing it in a way that is consistent with the mission that we have inherited, and we have every hope to believe we will pass on to others. I would also just say that I would hope that from an editorial point of view, what America is doing 5 or 10 years from now is looking back and saying, we helped to heal some of the divisions in both the church and in the world. The polarization that affects our country is often mirrored within the church in the United States. And I would like to think, I would like to hope, and we're working hard to do it, that America is an instrument of reconciliation among people and is one bridge between people who occupy different poles on the scale of, in the range of public opinion. That's important because every ministry participates in the one ministry of Jesus Christ, and the ministry of Jesus Christ is a ministry of reconciliation. So we ought to be able to look back and say that we were in some way contributing to making that happen, making it real in our own time and in history. I want to thank you for joining us today. Again, if you're able to, I invite you to consider supporting America with a gift today. You can find that at americamedia.org/donate. You can also find all of the content that we produce at americamagazine.org. You can follow us on social media, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos from America. And I invite you to come back next Friday for another weekly reflection concerning, well, of many things. So thanks for watching, and God bless, and happy Easter.